What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. This is now the 5th episode of the season already. It feels like the first month has just flown by. I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend, and as always, I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who took the time to leave a question on the post, even the ones that don't get featured in the video. Just know I read every single one, and I appreciate all of you guys. And of course, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. We're getting super close to 75,000. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and start off this episode with the first question from Sod, who says, why is no one talking about William Karlsson's insane start? He looks even better than 17-18, yet no one is talking about it. 18 points in 15 games, 8 goals. Do you think he can keep up this pace, or is it just a strong start? And also really appreciate the support. I'm glad you stuck around for as long as you have. Yeah, William Karlsson quietly having an unreal season. He leads Vegas in scoring with, like you said, 18 points in 15 games, 3 more than Jack Eichel, who's second on the team in scoring. Looks like he is well on his way to having another random explosive offensive season. Of course, he had that 43-goal, 78-point season in Vegas's inaugural year. Since that season, he's never even cracked the 30-goal or 60-point mark. He's on pace to obviously shatter those numbers this year. Just one of those guys who I guess randomly decides to pop off offensively every now and then. And on top of his crazy offensive production this season, he's also still playing a very strong 200-foot game. He kills penalties for Vegas. Such a valuable player for them, and I think easily one of the most underrated players in the league so far this season. The next question we have comes from Blues Two's King, who says, thoughts on the Oilers hiring Chris Knoblauch as the new head coach? Fun fact, Knoblauch means garlic in German, so at least Leon has a reason to smile about something. Well, you learn something new every day, because I did not know that. As far as Chris Knoblauch goes as a head coach, not somebody that I know a whole lot about. He was the head coach for the Hartford Wolfpack in the American Hockey League, which is the Rangers AHL affiliate. If I'm not mistaken, he coached McDavid in junior with the Erie Otters. I'm not sure if he was the head coach for all of McDavid's years down there, but I know he was for at least one, so there's a connection there, and I'm sure that came into play when hiring him. It's difficult to judge new head coach signings because we really can't until we see how the Edmonton Oilers perform with him behind the bench. As far as the decision to fire Jay Woodcroft, I thought it came at a weird time. In my opinion, it should have happened immediately after the Sharks game or the next day, not after the Oilers bounced back from that game with a win. Firing a head coach after a win like that, I think, is a little bit strange. Do I think firing Woodcroft at all was the right move? It's hard to say. When I made that video immediately following their loss to the San Jose Sharks, I did say in that video that it's probably time to make a big change just for the sake of shaking things up, whether that's a big trade, firing Woodcroft, or firing someone in upper management. In my opinion, Ken Holland should have actually been the one to go. It's not like Jay Woodcroft was the one who signed Jack Campbell to that contract. Jay Woodcroft can't go in the net and stop pucks. That being said, we all know that a coaching change can really spark a team sometimes, and that's obviously what the Oilers are hoping to achieve here. They play the Islanders tonight, which will be Knoblauch's first game behind the Oilers bench, so that's definitely one that I'm going to be watching closely. Moving along now, this next question comes from DeBrinket 70 Goals, who says, with Caden Gooley's solid start, a goal and 5 assists in 10 games, do you think we could see him maybe crack the 40 to 50 point mark if healthy? And also, really appreciate the kind words. I'm glad you guys enjoy this series. It's definitely something I look forward to every single week. As far as your question goes, Caden Gooley has been great for Montreal this season. In the 11 games that he's played, he's averaging around 20 minutes of ice time per game, and he's a guy that's kind of flown under the radar since becoming a full-time member of the Canadiens blue line last season. And last season, Gooley wasn't too far off from scoring at a half-point per game pace. He finished with 18 in 44 games. If he stays healthy for the remainder of this season, I don't think, 35 to 40 points is out of the question. In order for him to be, a 50-plus point defenseman, I think he's going to have to see more time in the power play. He rarely ever sees the ice with the man advantage. Caden Gooley is definitely developing really nicely, though, for the Canadiens. His offense has came on a lot quicker than I thought it would. When he was selected 16th overall by the Habs back in 2020, he wasn't really viewed as a defenseman with a ton of offensive upside. Of course, it was there. He wouldn't have been selected in the first round, but he was a prospect that was more so appealing for his defensive game and how responsible of a game he played at such a young age. So early on in his career, I've been really impressed with his offensive output. The next question we have comes from Sharks Bottom, who says, McDavid's slow start for his standards is a bit worrying in my opinion, seeing as how we expected 110 plus points. A lot of people probably even expected more, like 120 or 130. He has just 10 points in 11 games. Do you think this could be the year where we see him get under 100? Based on what we've seen from McDavid so far, I think under 100 points is definitely in the realm of possibilities for him. Early on this season, he has looked like a shell of the player we saw last season, who was just so dominant dominant. Basically every area of McDavid's game has taken a dramatic step back from last season. Of course, the offensive output, like you mentioned, with just 10 points in 11 games. His defensive game, it was never obviously a strength of his, but it's a lot worse this season than it was last season. All of his underlying numbers have taken a massive hit. In my opinion, McDavid has got to be playing injured or something. It looks like him returning from the injury he sustained early on this season for the Heritage Classic was him returning to the lineup too soon, because since then he has not been good. And I'm not even just talking about McDavid's standards. I'm talking like as a whole, he has not been good. Moving along now to the next question. This one comes from Total Level YT, who says, now that Zadorov wants out of Calgary, will the Flames finally commit to a rebuild? I know with contracts like Huberdeau, it is hard, but man, us Flames fans have wanted a rebuild for years. I don't really think Zadorov is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. If Gaudreau, Tkachuk, Toffoli, and all those names wanting out wasn't enough to send Calgary into a rebuild, I don't think Zadorov wanting out is going to make them head in that direction. In my opinion, the future direction of the Calgary Flames weighs largely on the future of Elias Lindholm and Noah Hanifin, who are both in the final years of their contracts, set to become UFAs at the end of the season. I think it would be a mistake for the Calgary Flames to bring both of those guys back. In my opinion, you could get massive trade hauls for each of them, trade returns that could really kickstart not even a full-on rebuild, but at the very least a retool. It's very clear that this core just isn't it, and I'm not saying Lindholm or Hanifin are the problem, but moving out guys like that could be the shakeup the Calgary Flames need, and I think it would be in their best interest to do so to set themselves up for future success. This next question comes from Drew NYE, who says, since we're about a month into the season, there are still some decent players left on the free agent market, players like Kane, Bear, Puljujarvi, etc. Where do you think some of these players are headed? And also, really appreciate the support. I'm glad you like the videos. Honestly, a little bit surprised that Ethan Bear is still without a contract. I thought he was more than serviceable for the Canucks last season in a bottom pairing role and would make a great cheap option for a team looking to improve their depth on the blue line. When it comes to Jesse Puljujarvi, his offense obviously fell off of a cliff last season. Defensively, a great player, and I think someone that could be useful in a fourth line shutdown role, but I think Puljujarvi probably wants more for himself than that. This is a guy who's left the NHL to go back and play in Finland before. Honestly, I think that's the most likely outcome here as he goes back and plays in the Liga. And lastly, Patrick Kane, definitely the biggest name available on the free agent market, and there's been some reports coming out about Patrick Kane over the last week or so. Talks are starting to heat up that he's narrowing his list of teams down. He's probably going to make a decision here soon. My prediction on where Patrick Kane signs, I think I'm going to go with the Buffalo Sabres, his childhood favorite team. That's where he grew up. I just think they make the most sense right now. As far as the Rangers go, I don't think they want to tinker with anything. They are firing on all cylinders. So my prediction for Patrick Kane, I'm going to go with him signing a 1 or 2 year deal with the Buffalo Sabres. The next question we have comes from Hugh Barkhurst, who says, what do you feel should take priority, standing up for your teammates or avoid getting an instigator penalty? Obvious example being the Leafs versus Canucks on Saturday. That game on Saturday was definitely a hot topic of discussion on hockey Twitter. There were 2 examples in that game of the Leafs sticking up for their teammates after a big hit or something, fighting the guy that laid the hit, and then getting an instigator penalty. And on both of those occasions, the Canucks scored on the ensuing power play, which is kind of crazy because we don't see instigator penalties happen that much. Just such a Leafs thing to happen. They finally start to stick up for their teammates, which is something people have been trying to hammer home all season long. They do it, and they get 2 instigator penalties and 2 power play goals against. Now, the Leafs ended up winning the game, so I don't think they would change anything, of course, but just such a Leafs thing to happen, and super ironic that the team kind of played like that. The first game, Ryan Reeves was a healthy scratch. The fourth line with Bobby McMahon on it looked really good, and I feel like the Leafs showed that they don't need Ryan Reeves in the lineup to be tough and to stick up for themselves and their teammates, so I think we probably don't see Ryan Reeves back in the lineup for at least a little while. This next question comes from Adam Warren, who says, I know they'll forever deny it, but do you think GMs talk to their stars about coaching hires or other staff? Example, did the Oilers ask McDavid what he thought about the Woodcroft situation? As you said, they probably will forever deny it, but if Ken Holland isn't asking McDavid about anything and everything, including a coaching change, then he's not doing his job right. Maybe it's not like this for every team in the league, but in this particular situation, I 1000% think Ken Holland at least had a chat with McDavid about the current situation. Maybe he didn't, give him a heads up on if he was going to fire Jay Woodcroft, but looking for the next head coach, I think McDavid was probably talked to because the new head coach wound up being McDavid's former coach from Erie. And now finally finishing out the video with a question from TJ, who says, who is your fantasy hockey MVP? I have answered a couple fantasy hockey questions in these videos throughout the year, and I've been enjoying doing it, so I'll probably try to answer, one every couple weeks. My MVP in fantasy hockey this year has undoubtedly been Quinn Hughes, who on Yahoo Fantasy fantasy is ranked number 1, and he was, I believe, my 4th round draft pick. So I got some incredible value there. Honorable mention to Larkin, who's ranked number 16, I think, right now in Yahoo Fantasy, and I got him in, I believe, like the 8th or 9th round or something like that. Let me know down below in the comment section, though, who has been your guys' fantasy hockey MVP, who has been your biggest steal. I want to hear how your guys' fantasy hockey is going so far. But that is going to wrap up this week's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. As always, like I mentioned at the start, huge thank you to every single one of you who participated this week, even if your question wasn't featured in the video. I read every single one, and I appreciate all of you guys. You all make this series so much fun for me to do. If you guys enjoyed today's episode and you want another next week, be sure to leave the video a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all again soon.